Our next speaker is Robert C. Gay. He's the founder of Kensington Capital Holdings, executive director of the private equity group HGGC, and Emeritus General Authority 70 of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He and his wife, Lynette, have co-founded multiple global humanitarian organizations, including Unitas, and helped establish social impact centers at BYU, the University of Utah, and Ensign Global University. A former senior partner at Bain Capital, he holds a PhD from Harvard and has been recognized with numerous awards for his contributions to business, philanthropy, and social change. Please welcome to the podium, Robert Gay.
Well, I hope I can work the slides the right way. But thank you for the opportunity to be here with you. Thanks, Alan and Eric. I also want to thank Tony and Samachi, who accepted our invitation to come here. And we now have Martin Luther King, who also accepted our invitation to be here. Martin, it's good to see you. We look forward to hearing from you today. I also want to recognize that my wife, who is here with me, it's kind of rare when we show up in the same room at the same time, and so it's good. And she's a major power behind everything that we do. I a little bit sympathize with Tony where he says, you know, I write the checks and Samachi does the work, and it's a little bit in our family the same way. I'm grateful to have my son, John, and his wife, Gabriel, also here with us. That's also very rare. We have 7 children and 23 grandchildren who all have been involved in everything that we do. We have lots of friends here and a lot of people who've worked with us. I want to talk about becoming an agent for impactful change. I'm not sure what happened to the slide. It got lost out there. The word on top of that was impossible. And if you take out I am out of impossible, you have possible. And this is a way of being able to speak to all of you who have been told what you're trying to do is impossible. I don't know how many of you in this room, but we've been told so many times, you can't do it, you're doing too many things, you can't ever get this done. And so if you think of legacy building, our legacy that we want to communicate is it is possible to do the impossible. And ours has been a journey that has had great impact, actually. We have an organization called Kensington Capital Philanthropies. That's our family office, philanthropy office. And we've co-founded or founded several organizations that all continue to work, called Engage Now Africa, Ensign Global University, Ending Modern Slavery, the Brigham Young University Social Impact Center, Unitas, and the Center for Business Health and Prosperity. Collectively, these organizations have now impacted probably 125 million lives around the world. And we have worked all around the world. We work extensively in Asia, in India, and we work extensively in Africa in particular, but we've worked in South America, we've worked in the United States, we've worked everywhere. Our purpose has been to heal, rescue, and lift millions of vulnerable individuals and families and communities, always focusing on self-reliance through entrepreneurship and strategic programs, projects, and partnerships. This will be the only slide we'll talk about our organization. All the rest of it will be on other subjects. The pictures there, I just want to point out a couple of them. We have here on the building with the little gold rim around there is our Ensign Global University in Pong, Ghana. Just about an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes, maybe 2 hours, depending on the roads and the traffic. Where we have the only Western or U.S. standard accredited School of Public Health in the continent of Africa. That is a significant accomplishment. When we did our accreditation, that public school in Ghana was rated higher in its review than Johns Hopkins School of Public Health in the United States. And we have Steve Aller, who's the president of the university, here with us, and a professor at University of Utah. Steve started a little program just to tell you what you can do. He started a program called Health to Go at this university. And that's where we send people out on bicycles with healthcare tools to go into rural villages. And it serves about 30,000 villagers today. It will go, the population, target population is 13 million. We will get to millions. And the most impactful thing that is happening is that Steve has been able to reduce the mortality rates of children under 5 by 60%, just by going into these villages on bicycles with healthcare. That university is linked, if you see the building on the right that looks like that massive building, to a building that we dedicate next week, or 2 weeks, at University of Utah, called the Epicenter for impact at the University of Utah. It's student-led organization, and we have our Business Health and Prosperity Center there that links to the campus in Ghana. And basically, we have moved now, created a Master's of Business Creation program in Ghana. That's a University of Utah degree. You can get Western degrees in Ghana now, which is an amazing thing when you stop and think about it. And we just came back from Korea, where Utah has another campus. We're looking at India, where we may have a fully global campus in the next few years. And also inside that building is the Sorensen Impact Center, which is one of the largest student-led impact groups at Jeff Woolley, who pioneered Unitas with us, and who chairs the Impact Center. I think it is the largest student-led center in the world, isn't it? Yeah. And so, and the other pictures are just some of the projects that we've done. The maternal health care are the upper right-hand corner is the only private rescue center for those we bring out of trafficking in the country of Ghana. Because if you don't help rehabilitate, re-educate those who bring out of traffic, they just go back into trafficking. And then, you know, the microfinance projects in India, the boreholes and all the like of the literacy, the financial education, those are the things that we've engaged in that represent this 125 million plus people at this point in time, and growing tremendously still. So my whole thing, and I said the road from Elche to Rundo, those are towns that I've worked in my life. And I just wanted to talk about different learnings. How do you impact this many people? How does it happen? Because it doesn't happen by chance. It's very systematic. And I just wanted to talk about 5 lessons we've learned. These aren't meant to be comprehensive lessons. You've all learned them, but 5 things that have stood out in my mind. And just go through those briefly with you. The first one, having vision, being a visionary. So, Nobel laureate Elie Wiesel, I heard him one night in Montreal say this: the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. And so I started as a young missionary in Spain for my church back in 1971. And they asked me to go to a little town called Elche. What you see on the left there are the caves of the gypsies that live in Elche. And on the right is another gypsy camp in Spain. And I was there during the Franco years, and the gypsies had no citizenship rights at all in the country of Spain. They were not just marginalized, they were not recognized. They were totally off the side, out of sight, out of mind. And one day, my missionary companion said to me, "We're not doing any good out here. We're talking to all these people. I mean, you're looking out here to convert Catholics to Mormonism, and they've got a cathedral in this little town of Elche, of 50, 60,000 people, whatever it was, and we're 2 missionaries that came in with nothing and had to find a room. It took us 3 days to find a room because nobody wanted to rent to us because we were missionaries from a different church. And finally somebody rented, and our church consisted of a little dining hall where we ate lunch every day. And so you try to say you want to come to church and meet us, and then instead of coming to a cathedral, they come to a little dining hall. It was quite a contrast for the Spaniards. And so my companion got pretty frustrated at that, and he just said, "We're not doing anything. Can we go down and see the gypsies?" So we walked into this cave village in Elche. We took 12 oranges with us, or 24 oranges with us. It's amazing what an orange can do to bring life to people. You think it changed lives down there in that cave, and all of a sudden I saw that. But that wasn't the lesson that I learned, that you can impact many people with very little capital. The lesson that I learned is that over the years, you can make all this money, you can become successful, and you can go out and do great things. You can build hospitals, you can build schools, you can build all sorts of programs. But until you're willing to go into that village and say, it's not because I built a hospital that we're here serving you. You have to be willing to say, in the eyes of God, you and I are the same. We are brothers and sisters. There is no difference. We're not some big person. As somebody said one day to one of our workers out in the field, "Well, you're this big chief and I'm an ant." Until you learn that we're all ants together, you haven't learned the lesson of where it all begins. We have to see one another. We have to recognize, but for the grace of God, there's nothing that separates us. We're all human beings. And you have to look at work with that type of love. And that's what I call vision, seeing people for who they are and who we are. And don't try to tell yourself you're some great person. No, you've just been, as Tony says, been blessed in many different ways. Second, a blocker and tackler. When I was at Bain Capital, we'd call it having a nuclear reactor. And let me explain. When we started out in Chester, you can remember, we went to Mohammed Yunus, who had started the Grameen Bank, the first microcredit bank in the world, which he would ultimately win the Nobel Prize for, in having people rethink modern economics. The whole idea was you couldn't bank the poor, and his whole idea is that you could. And so we went to Mohammed to get advice. And he told us a story that none of us have ever forgotten. He said he was in Bangladesh. And in a market square, in a crowded place, and this elderly gentleman came up to him. And he was weak, he wasn't strong, but he was in good health. And he says, I need money. I need you to give me money. And Muhammad said to him, I'm not giving you money. He says, what do you mean? I need money. I can't live. I don't have anything to eat. I don't have anything but clothes on my back. And he said, well, how did you get here? Did you take a bus to get here? He says, are you not listening to me? I don't have money for a bus. I came here. I walked here. And Muhammad said to him, as he looked around the marketplace, he said, you see that gentleman over there? He said, you mean that man with the package? Yes, that man that has a package. He says, well, you go over and ask him if you can deliver that package for him because you are a walker. And what he was trying to teach everybody has God-given gifts and talents, and we have to bring that up, and they have to take accountability for themselves. And that became the basis of all self-reliance work, that you can't lift people to self-reliance unless they're willing to take responsibility for themselves. It's a fundamental law. And because if you give them money, it may last for 3 months or 4 months, but they will be back knocking on your door. You have to be able to have them take responsibility for their life. And so we developed a whole program at the church later on called the Self-Reliance program that we took to over 100 countries around the world, which was all based upon accountability. We took the microcredit finance program and we said, how can we help people become self-reliant, whether it be finding a business and starting and growing a small business, or learning how to stay employed or find a job, managing personal finances, savings, and bank accounts, as Becky talked about this morning. Emotionally, we put them into small groups, and Tony talked about mentoring, and we turned to peer mentoring. We found the best mentors are the most available mentors were peers. Have them talk in, have them give assignments to one another during the week, and have them come back and report, and have them follow up during the week. And each of them self-teach and self-monitor themselves. And we were able to change the world again just by teaching basic principles of mentoring and accountability while teaching skills. So we put the skills, you have to have the programs, you have to have the right programs. And we say, well, that's what we always go out and we do to people. But the biggest fault in everything that goes on in philanthropy is that we don't do it in our own organizations. The real unreliant people are the organizations that don't have a way of staying self-reliant themselves. They constantly, we used to do a conference of 150 NGOs every year, and there wasn't one that showed up that was self-reliant. Tony built a base, okay? If you think about it, our family office is our base. Everything that we take from that, anybody wants to donate or have us do a special program for them, it all goes to the program because they're not funding anything because we built the base to do it. And you have to have the skill set. You need local knowledge. You need local people. If you think you can drop into Africa, you know, as a white American, you can't. It eventually wears out. And so we built and educated a whole team. Our NGO is an African NGO, and it's all run by Africans. And you look at Somachi here. You don't realize the difference. So Somachi is a woman. That's almost unheard of, to be CEO of an African organization as a woman. We have CEOs in our organization that are women. That's who Somachi met to begin with. That's how we met her. But you develop locally, and you develop both leaders from male and female, because you're going to find out soon women can do a lot more than men can do in a lot of the rural areas in urban areas of Africa or in India. But we don't build our own organizations. We don't build the nuclear reactor. Why did Bain Capital become so successful? Because we were the best analysts that were available in the world. We found the best people, we hired them, and we were data-driven. And we could crack cases, and we outperformed all private equity firms for years and years. Because we put together, not because we were smarter, we just put together the right team. So this is what I call blocking and tackling. It goes both in the programs that you're doing, but also internally. I hope that makes sense to you, because it is critical. Second, an innovator. You know, I taught economics for a couple of years at Harvard University. And there was a wonderful group at the time, all the brightest economists at Harvard and MIT, and they formed a group called Data Research Institute, DRI. And they had the best macroeconomic predicting models that were ever built. And for 9 out of 10 years straight, they predicted downturns when there were upturns. Why is that important? Because they were trying to rely upon models that were developed by Keynes and Friedman and Samuelson. And all those models were wrong. If nobody's ever told you that, those models are wrong. They aren't the leaders of what causes economic growth. We now know more than anything, innovation, disruptive innovation, is what causes nations to grow, people to grow in their wealth. And so Muhammad said to us, all human beings are born entrepreneurs. Everybody has something that they know how to do. And so wealth is knowledge, is what George Gilder said. And growth is learning. What is money? Time. Everybody thinks the key is money. No, it's ideas. You've got to disrupt. You've got to rethink the paradigms. And so, what do you see there on the right? Anybody know what that is on the right side of that picture? And in the background, on that background is 400 acres of cornfields in Butler, Indiana. I put $400 million into those cornfields in Butler, Indiana. And I went home and said, that's got to be the dumbest thing you ever did. I did. I couldn't believe it. I had I had a guy by the name Keith Bussey come to me with the idea that said, that's not a cornfield. That's the lowest cost mini mill in the world. And I said, Keith, what are you talking about? And he said, have you ever heard of thin slab casting? We're the only people in the world that can install it and build it. And I went over to Dusseldorf, Germany, and I found the inventor of thin slab casting, which was the new wave in mini mills in a time period where everybody said we were in the death spiral in steelmaking in the United States. And we bought thin slab casters, which is a continuous casting that cuts out all the costs of an integrated steel mill. And we built, in 1.5 years, what became the world's lowest cost mini mill and now is a multi-billion-dollar New York Stock Exchange company. But you have to not see cornfields. You have to see what can happen. How do you change the paradigm? Where do you go? And so today, the latest book, you could go to Gilder's book that precedes it, or to Clay Christensen's book, The Poverty Paradox, or I forget what Clay's is called, but the latest book is How Nations Escape Poverty. Well, it's all about innovation, but different types of innovation. Steve Covey said every breakthrough is a break from or a break with. So what's How Nations Escape Poverty? It's liberalization. What does that mean? Well, if you look at all the poverty statistics around the world, they'll all tell you how they've dropped dramatically. And there's only one reason why they've dropped dramatically, is because China and India decided to enter the free market. Market liberalization. It had nothing to do with foreign aid, which was wasted, billions and billions of wasted, hundreds of billions on foreign aid that did not move one needle in per capita GDP anywhere it went. China allowed rice farmers to own rice fields. That changed the world for China. That simple little thing. It was all the liberalization of the capital markets saying, okay, we understand we're going to be a state-sponsored partner in the liberalization of a capital market. And they have their rules and regulation, but they have outperformed all the economies. India will surpass China. India went from nowhere to being the 5th largest economy in the world. It'll be the 2nd largest. China will probably dispute that, but that's the trend because of how they're managing and moving things. Gaps. Aldo talked about gaps today. There's a massive market out there for somebody that's not looking at it the right way. Everybody thinks they need DC and they need AC or the hybrid. That's what Steve Jobs did, right? Nobody else understood that what an iPod to an iPhone could do, but he saw it, and it was instantaneously received because of the convenience. Putting the icons on a telephone. You know, we all walk around, and I told somebody the other day, when I went to college and graduated in 1976, we were still using slide rules. When I got my PhD at Harvard, we were doing batch processing to run our computer models. The first IBM computer came out in my first year at McKinsey. The gaps. So it's going to be product gaps. It's going to be market liberalization. And the final, as Jeff well knows, is overcoming capital market imperfections. That's how we reached tens of millions. Chester didn't tell you that he served on the board of a company that we partnered with called SKS in India, the largest microfinance organization in the world. It had 25,000 or so clients when we discovered it, went on their board, Chester went on their board. We brought data analysis and different tools that they didn't have, that was our whole idea. Let's go in and help their management become better. But they needed capital. And so we said the biggest thing holding back microfinance is good middle-tier microfinance organizations don't have access to capital. Big banks wouldn't lend to them. So we did it. We filled the gap. And we did it until the big banks finally did it for us. Until about, what, maybe 8, 9 years ago? 10 years ago. But, well, Jeff did that and moved it. I think SKS went from 25,000 to 8 million or so. And then, then we helped when the whole microfinance organization sort of got in trouble. We also sent our Unitas teams in to work on better tools, better risk management. But you take advantage of capital market imperfections, capital product gaps, and capital market liberalization. And it's all ultimately about innovation. It isn't about fiscal and monetary policy, I assure you. Accelerator. This is a term that we coined in the industry, becoming an accelerator. And we've talked about it in many different ways. You cannot do this stuff alone. We weren't going to go build a new microfinance organization bank in India, but what we could do is do a lot of due diligence and find out who would be the best partners for us to join. And we created close to 30 partners, I think, and accelerated them by bringing capital and tools. And if you look at all of this today in our work, today, Engage Now Africa probably has 40 schools and 25,000 students a day attending school. Our name isn't on any of them. We've partnered with everybody and moved their schools forward. I loved, Becky had a better picture of a outhouse, I guess, for lack of a better word, than I do there. But we went into into Ethiopia, and went into the Rift Valley and did a 60-village project plan in helping the valley. And one of the biggest problems is sanitation. So we taught them how to build portable outhouses. And after we did that, we took the government out and showed them, and the government then went out and built 35,000 of them. And so you accelerate through partnerships, I guess, is my main thing. You don't try to do everything yourself. Even at Bain Capital, when we grew Bain Capital from 35 million to what will now be a little close to about 200 billion under management this year. When we took it from there, I don't remember one deal that we did all our own. Everything we had a partner, because we always knew we weren't the smartest guys in the room, though we claimed to be, but we were smart enough to know that we were going to get a lot further, have a lot bigger impact if we joined forces. And then there's your that's your microcredit, credit system. It's pretty simple, but again, it was all partnering with MFIs there. And here's the thing. Somebody dropped this plaque off on my desk one day. It's a statement by Harry Truman. It is amazing what you can accomplish if you do not care who gets the credit. You think about 125 million people. I defy you to go find Unitas name, Engage Now name anywhere in there. We're more than happy to give anybody who's our partner the credit. It's about having impact and getting there. You see the word Experian. All of you know what Experian is, credit consumer rating agency, right? That started in my living room as a young boy. My dad was the CEO for Howard Hughes. And a guy by the name of John Diebold came to our house one Sunday afternoon and started drawing a picture of an ATM. They didn't exist. And he explained to us what an ATM would do for retail banking, cut the costs, and it was an innovation. But then the secret of the ATM was, what was it going to do? something that was just beginning to emerge that didn't exist in the world, an information industry. It was going to collect consumer data as they used their cards to get into the ATM. And we all know all too well how much data is collected today. But so they launched and put the first ATM in the world at Shawmut Bank in Boston and started collecting data and started a consumer collection, data company for credits that's now called Experian. But Hughes was not active in his company. He was a 100% shareholder, but he had a board of 5 people. My dad was the chairman of the board, and they all voted 5-0 to go do this, to launch ATMs. And actually, they were working on the personal computer well before anybody at this point, and to do this data collection company. And it started making money. And while Hughes didn't attend the board meetings, because he didn't put himself on the board, he looked at all the reports, the financial reports, and all of a sudden, this little entity, which they called Hughes Dynamics, started making a lot of money. And Hughes called my father and said, "Bill, what is this?" He said, "Well, it's a company we started." He said, "I didn't tell you you could start that." I said, "You didn't have to tell us. We're the board. You gave us the authority to do that." He said, "Well, let me tell you something about your board vote of 5-0. It's now 4 against and 1 for, and you're the only one for it." He'd gone to every other board member and they said, how did all this start? They said, "Oh, it was Bill's idea." And so Hughes started just yelling and screaming at my father, his CEO. It went on for 2 hours. And my dad said to him, "Hey, I got to say something to you, Mr. Hughes." And he said, it went on for another half hour. How do I know that? I was sitting on the other side of the desk while this conversation is going. And he says, "I really need to say something to you." He said, "All right, Bill, what do you have to say to me?" He said to him, "You know, Mr. Hughes, as we've had this conversation, I decided I'm going to probably wind up in hell for having worked for you." But he said, "That's not what's really bothering me. When I get there, I know you're going to be the SOB leading the place." and Hughes actually laughed at that too. But his punchline was, "Bill, you know, this is my company. It's my name. Shut it down. I don't care if it costs us." It was a matter of pride. It wasn't a matter of whether it would succeed. And you have to be able to get over ego, if that's what I'm trying to say. And to not worry about, we did this, we did that. It's, we did it, or we worked together, or however it is. Use partners and don't worry about the credit is one of the lessons. Finally, servant. My dad kept on his wall this quote. It was by a French professor whose students came to him one day and said, "If you're so smart, tell us the history of the world in 1 sentence." And this is the sentence he gave them. "In the days of service, all things are founded. In the days of social privilege, they deteriorate. And in the days of vanity, they are destroyed." Martin, who was here one day, invited me to Washington, D.C. to speak at a conference that he was hosting, I think, for Realizing the Dream Foundation. And when I got there, on the morning we were to speak, I was surprised to see Jeff Sachs sitting at the same table with me. Jeff and I were in the same PhD program at Harvard. And by the way, Tony, it was Michael Porter's PhD program too. It was a very small, little select program that was, they had to qualify to get both the PhD in economics and the DBA in business. It was a joint program. And Jeff was 1 year behind me, but had become now this fairly well-recognized global economist, and had taken $300+ million of George Soros money into villages in Sudan, which ended up being a total waste of money. But he got up there that morning carrying his Wall Street Journal, slamming it on the podium because we'd just done the bailout of the banks. Well, remember during the crash, we bailed out the banks. And he just slams on that and he says, what we need is a bailout of the poor. You know, we need to put billions and billions into the poor. And, you know, he had made this great prediction that poverty would be eradicated by, I forget what year, 2025 or 2030. And he was just wrong, because it isn't money that's going to change it. How you manage money makes a big difference too. And Jeff got up there and was just railing, you know, probably he, much more liberal than I was, but then I spoke a couple speakers later after him. And I went to Memphis, and Martin, this is a picture, you know, his father's last talk was to the striking sanitation workers in Memphis the day before he was assassinated. And the full text of his talk is a remarkable talk. But he talked about the need to have unity and to push forward and to move forward. And then he talked about a trip that he took to Israel where he drove from down the road to Jericho. And how windy, and how he could see when Christ gave the parable of the Good Samaritan, how robbers could come on that road and different things. And he said, you know, the remarkable thing that we see from that is that there were 3 people who passed by to give assistance to the injured person on the road. And the first 2 were worried about what would happen to them if they stopped and helped. And the last one was worried about what would happen to the person on the road if he did not stop and help. And then he says, I hope you can see all that's been happening. I'm so grateful to have been born in this part of the 20th century, of the progress that has been making by all of you, of how we've come together. And then he said, I can see it. I've been to the mountaintop. I've seen the promised land. And then he said the faithful words, I might not be there when you get there. But then he said that doesn't matter, because all I'm trying to do is to do God's will. That's all he was about. One of the greatest human beings that ever lived on this planet was trying to do God's will. He was trying to be a servant, and he was changing the world doing it, and he gave his life doing it. And so, if you look at Rundu there, that's Rundu. That's on the Angola border, 600 kilometers from the capital city of Windhoek. And we had a young man who we helped get a PhD in South Africa, and his wife, who became the only female gynecologist, the second, I should say, 2 female gynecologists in the country of Namibia. And after she got her degree, what did they want to do? They wanted to go build a hospital for the poorest of the poor women in this little village where she came from, in Rundu. It's all about forgetting yourself and going. And so I'm going to close with one story. This is a road. If you've ever heard the Blood Diamond War that took place in Sierra Leone, well, I lived in and around Sierra Leone for 3 years. I used to travel this road. It was a road from Freetown to Bo, Sierra Leone, and then you went from Bo to Liberia, where all the atrocities took place. And those big holes there were holes that were created when the rebels came and blew up all the asphalt roads and left these enormous craters in the roads. And it would take about 5 hours to drive from Freetown to Bo. And I'd make that trip every month. And we do it in a little Ford pickup truck. And I wasn't driving one day. Another person was driving. We had two people in the back seat. We're going along this road, going up and down. And by the way, you have to make a fundamental decision when you drive roads like this. You're either going to go slow and go up and down, or you're going to go fast and just bounce. And we always made the decision to bounce. So we're going along these at pretty good clips. And we're the only ones on it because it's only, who else would be crazy enough except for the LDS missionaries and the UN. And that's who traveled these roads. And so we're going along, and I get a call on my cell phone. I said, we don't have cell phone coverage out here. And all of a sudden I realized that we're at the midpoint between Bow and Freetown, and the UN had built a cell tower right there for their own communications. And I answered my phone, and it's my former partner from Bain Capital. He said, Bob, I'm in your office in London. I said, great, Paul. I'm glad to hear you. I mean, why are you calling? He said, oh, I thought you'd just want to know. We just closed our $10 billion fund. Well, to many of you, that might not mean a whole lot. But to me, I was the largest shareholder at Bain Capital. I knew exactly what my ownership of that $10 billion fund was. And I know that I had given it all back to go out into the mission field in Sierra Leone and Ghana with my church. And in a nanosecond, I mean nanosecond, probably as fast as AI might do it, I calculated what it just cost me, materially, dollars and cents, to be out on that dirt road in Sierra Leone. And it staggered me. It would stagger anybody. It was a lot of capital. And the first thought that came to me, surely God knows what you could have done with this money. Surely you didn't have to come these 3 years, you could have come later. And all these thoughts just flooded my head. I thought it was all out of my system. It wasn't. And so I'm thinking, man, this is a lot. And I don't say another thing for the next 2 hours to anybody in the car. I can't get it out of my head. And then our driver hits one of these holes. And as he hits the hole, the truck doesn't come out. The tire's stuck, and we go into a triple somersault. And we land on my side of the car. The front end has been squished in, and we're sliding around this dirt gravel road. And I think everybody in the car is dead. And after what seemed like an eternity, but it was probably just a minute or two, they all sort of roused, and we had to kick out the back window to climb out of the car. We get out of the car, and we're in this little village in the middle of nowhere. And I hear the death wailing cry. If you've never heard the death wailing cry in Africa, it's loud, it's whiny, you can't miss it. And I'm wondering, nobody's dying, we're all here. Then I realized everybody's staring at me. And I didn't realize that I had glass all through my head and blood streaming down my face. And then I looked down at my arm, and there's this gaping hole in it. There's nothing there, just tendons. And there's just blood everywhere. And we don't have, we're on a dirt road. And my first thought is, great. Not only did you just miss out on the biggest deal of your life at Bain Capital, now you're going to die in some godforsaken place, or you're going to lose your arm because of infection. So we didn't have any bandages. We took a shirt, we made a tourniquet, wrapped it best we could, and just sat on the road waiting for somebody else to come. We had to go another 40 kilometers or so to get to the medical clinic in Bow. And let me tell you, there's no medical clinic in Bow. There is not what we'd call a medical clinic. And the doctor comes out, he takes a look at this, and he said, oh man, there's really nothing I can do for you. You need to get back to Accra. Are you going to lose your arm? He says, I can wash it and clean it for you and bandage it, but I can't do anything for you. And I said, that'd be great. And he invited me into what he called his operating theater. And it's a little wooden table, maybe 3 feet wide, 7 feet long, with 2 light bulbs hanging over there. So I lie down on that, and then he sees this little badge that we wear as missionaries. You know, President Robert C. Gay, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He says, oh, you're a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? I said, yeah. He says, then you might want to hear the story I have to tell you. And I said to him, whatever, I'm not going anywhere. I was just so upset and feeling so sorry for myself. And then he shoots me some painkiller, and he says, you see these instruments on the table? You see this gown that I'm wearing? You see these bandages here? If this had happened to you here a year ago, I wouldn't have any of these things. The only reason I have any of this is because some elderly couple from your church about a year and a quarter ago came by and donated these all to our clinic. And then I heard this voice just bellow inside me. Everything you have in your life, everything you've received is because other people first went into service for you. And that's what I totally believe to this day. We can look at it and we can say, what a great success we are. There's 100 million people. But we aren't. We have to see ourselves for who we are. We're just brothers and sisters. And we're, as Martin's father said, trying to do God's will, to be one, because that's the greatest power there is. And if you have that power, there's nothing you can't accomplish. You can accomplish the impossible. You put together the right tools. You think about how you can disruptively innovate. You think about how you can partner and accelerate. But you see and you serve. And so that's our story of how we've sort of grown. And I thank you all for the time today.